Friday, August 30th, 2019. We are looking at the upper level water vapor imagery for the northern hemisphere. We're going to take a look at, I guess it's a hurricane now, Hurricane Dorian. We'll see it right here. It's just now starting to finally develop an eye wall, and you can see this opening out in front of it. Stalled high pressure. It'll get sucked right up in there. Take a look at, this is shortwave infrared, goes through the night and then into this morning. Then you see the eye wall develop. Now watch right here last night, right? Poof. You see that? Like it was targeted. We'll stop that right. Slow it down a little bit. Watch this. You just see it open up right there. Poof. Alright, now we'll take a look at the most current visible feeds. Now some of this is just overshoots from these high clouds forming, or thunderheads, whatever you want to call them. But some of it is aerosols left by planes. Now, this is from last evening. Take a good look at it before the sun was setting. You can see it being superheated. This is from yesterday too. Now, last evening we saw a lot of vapor generation from land. Here's Puerto Rico, and this is right over the radar, superheating and generation. There's a refinery over here. You could also see it on Cuba and over southern Florida, and we'll see that again to feed this storm. Most likely the next couple nights. Now here's more current images. We can see an eye wall. Now, I don't know if you remember hurricanes back in the day, but the eye walls were always void of clouds. Not anymore. Oftentimes you can see airplanes going in there. Actually, yesterday you could see airplanes going right through it, seeing it. Let's see. I don't want to blow this up because it'll cut my stream, but you could see an airplane. You see that line right there. Try that again. See the line? Now there's lots of information you can find on how and where to seed a hurricane. Here we'll just look at the past couple days leading up to this, all the land generation out in front of this, and then this huge storm. If you check a couple videos back, I'll tell you exactly how these storms blow up right over Kansas and Oklahoma all the time. And then we're starting to see some generation over Florida right now. Let's go to the climate model real quick. It is a new model's coming out. This is a GFS. It's only 33% complete, but we'll see what they got going. And earlier it was heading right for Okeechobee, or the lake. Now it's heading just north of it, and then rolling up the coast. Now we'll take a look at the total precip cum. We'll let that load, and while we're letting that load, we'll take a look at the past 24 hours of radar imagery. You'll see your nightly ionization, or cold air trapped under a temperature inversion, and then you see when the sun comes up, this is all excited nanoparticulate. Here's your most current images. This storm rolling over Oklahoma, you see all these interference spikes and patterns around it. And then I want to show yesterday's imagery, and we'll see this large digital ping signature right over the panhandle of Florida. And this is interference caused by by a paved pause unit at England Air Force Base, heterodyning in phase with the next surrounding next rads. And what that can do, it can rapidly change the density of the upper atmosphere. Get that covered. Now we'll get into, we'll just look at the geocolor imagery real quick. At least it's not, they're calling it a hurricane yesterday. It looked nothing like a hurricane. At least it's got an eye wall now. Look at all this filth out in front of. I'm sure I'll start seeing trails in the sky here soon. Now we're going to, when I said the space fence, yeah, here I got that digital pink signature, and what that is this unit here. It's part of the space fence. Now this thing puts out a lot of power, like 3 to 5 gigawatts. I think I covered this in the video yesterday. Covered that. And if you follow me on Facebook or BitChute, please share your photos if you're in Florida of your sky leading up that. But of course, be careful and be safe. What else did I want to cover? We go up. I wanted to, oh yeah, Project Storm Fury, okay? Now this ran from 1962 to 1983. It was an attempt to weaken cyclones by flying aircraft into them and seeding them with silver iodide. Okay, now that's 30, 40, 50 years ago plus. We got bigger toys nowadays, and we're going to get into that right now. First off, we're going to start off with an article from the Smithsonian. And this is article's called, I don't know if you've seen this movie, it sucked. I went to the theaters to see it, well, you know, because I'm obsessed with the weather. But this article was put out, I guess, after that movie was released. And down here at the bottom, I want to cover, more recently, Dr. Ross Hoffman, Principal Scientist and Vice President of Atmospheric and Environmental Research, is investigating the possibility of redirecting hurricanes with the use of, among other possibilities, microwaves beamed to Earth from one or more solar-fueled satellites. It's basically an orbiting death ray. Exactly. Fleming notes that about the technology using computer modeling. Now this is important, because this is, they work with these models, like back in the day. What did LBJ, the president, Lyndon B. Johnson, said something about advancing satellite prediction and eventually into, I forget the exact quote, I wish I had it up. I think it is actually in this article, if I remember correctly. We will check. Right here. This is another quote by him. He who controls the weather controls the world. But that's not the quote I was looking for. He was talking about advances in computer modeling, weather prediction, and then eventually weather control. Like when they started coming out with your computer models, like this one here, your GFS, or all these models, really. The GFS has the most money put into it, so that's the one they usually go with. But they, you know, when they started making these, they had in mind what would later be called geoengineering. So it goes hand in hand, I'm telling you. Weather modification, climate engineering, and computer modeling, or NWP, numerical weather prediction, goes hand in hand. So here's 2004. This is also on Ross Hoffman, Sapping a Hurricane's Strength. Imagine a world where microwave beams, a biodegradable oil slick, or a shower of silver iodine from a plane would be enough to weaken or deflect a hurricane, saving thousands of lives. So this is 15 years ago. And I've covered Ross Hoffman before. Here's another paper by him. Controlling hurricanes through optimum. I can never say this word right, especially on the spot. Perturbations, whatever. But we'll go on here. And he tells you exactly, and this is 2006. Okay? And he shows you your computer models, the simulations, and future weather mod. Improved models, observations, and assimilation systems will advance to the point where forecasts are much improved and include an estimate of uncertainty, thus allowing advanced knowledge that a change should be detectable in particular cases. Propagate uncertainty. So you go through this and what all you need. Like right here, it was the big one back then, but we got all this now. This was the main thing he's talking about that we need improvement in. Well, we've got quantum computing, we've got nanotechnology and DNA computers. You know, this is why I say the numerical weather prediction, it goes hand in hand with geoengineering. I'll leave some of these links. Here's unperturbed, controlled. So he ran what hurricane was that back in 91. I forget what it was called, but he ran computer models of like what would happen if such happened. This is surface wind field evolution, and we're talking about perturbing the atmosphere to weaken a hurricane. And you can see what the difference would be from whatever shift that he made. And here's temperature I can't say it. Hurricane Andrew, that's what it was. You can find some good, but you can see what happens after they screw with it there on the computer. But you know, I'll leave these links so you can go through it. I'm not reading it all. But we'll move right along, and we're going to go to, this is the American Meteorological Society. And they're talking about inadvertent weather modification. I've covered this before too. And B, cloud-mediated effects of aerosols. Aerosols act mostly as cloud drop condensation nuclei, CCN, or cloud seed, and some of them as ice nuclei, both of which change cloud radiative and precipitation properties in complex ways. Over oceans, emissions from fossil fuel burning ships produce tracks observed to dramatically influence the extent and persistence of local shallow cloud cover, reducing the amount of solar radiation received at the surface and enhancing the amount reflected back to space. Aerosols also suppress precipitation from shallow or short-lived clouds. Capping effect. Their impacts on deep convective clouds are much less certain, but are potentially of great importance. Recent research suggests that, depending on meteorological conditions, aerosols can either increase or decrease rainfall from such clouds. And here's the kicker at the end. In warm, moist atmospheres, aerosols often invigorate deep convective clouds, usually resulting in greater electrical activity, stronger damaging winds, and a greater likelihood of flash floods. Studies indicate that aerosols might also modulate the intensity of tornadoes and hurricanes. So right there is from the American Meteorological Society. And here's a document I'm sure most of you are familiar with, released by the Air Force in 1996, called Weather as a Force Multiplier, Owning the Weather at 2025. And this is a long one too. I'll leave a link to this. Nanotechnology. Where do I want to get down here to the, where it was all using satellites. And yeah, here's your scalar interference zone, creating artificial plasma mirrors in the sky. And then down here at the bottom they have like a little timeline. Here's all your what these stand for. And 2025 is what, well, almost close to 5 years from now. But they've got most of this done. So, they got the t-shirt, so to speak. Precipitation modification, storm modification, space weather modification, fog and cloud modification, counter weather, and artificial weather. And then the next one, here's all your different, like your computer modeling, like smart clouds, nanotechnology. Okay. And the last one they got talking about VRWX, which is virtual weather. If you ask me, we're already here, and most of this is controlled, especially over land. Now I've pulled up my map too. But they've been working on this for 100 years. There is a system in place. I'm telling you, I've got it mapped out. So back to, yeah, this is the Air Force document. Here's another one that's enlightening when you read it. Weather Modification Law in the U.S. This fellow here, he can only find 11 cases that pertained to weather modification. And you can go through, I'll just go to the end on his conclusion, because there really isn't any laws. You have the Environmental Modification Act, but other than that, there's really nothing. It is clear that man already has technology to modify weather, and that more effective technology can be designed. However, we need scientific knowledge to understand how and when to use such weather modification technology, so that intelligent choices can be made instead of guesswork. Civilization would immensely benefit if damage from drought, floods, hurricanes, hail, tornadoes, etc. could be reduced. But before we reap such practical benefits, we need much more long-term financial support of basic scientific research on weather modification by the government. Despite the potential immense economic importance of cloud seeding and the existence of commercial cloud seeding technology since 1950, the courts in the U.S. have not yet begun to resolve legal issues involving either negligent cloud seeding or the rights of landowners to rains from the clouds that are either above their land or upwind from the land. I have been able to find only 11 court cases in the U.S. on cloud seeding, all decided during 1950 to 87, and no cases since 1987. After reading all the reported court cases in the U.S. on this topic, I conclude that states need to create a government agency to compensate people who have been harmed by weather modification, or alternatively, landowners need to purchase flood drought insurance. Now, what he was, property rights of clouds, that was brought up in this. Or should we have social clouds? Clouds to benefit all, like socialism. And then we're going to end on, because I've been talking about wind farms a lot, and here is how they could potentially use wind farms for good. And this is for offshore wind farms and how they could potentially reduce precipitation during a hurricane. Here they're talking about Hurricane Harvey. And also, I've seen another one on how offshore wind farms could decrease wind speed too by capturing the kinetic energy and so on. But, when you get into the wind farms and you see how I found one on how they discharge into the upper atmosphere, but they're also ionizing the soil below. And this is how, like in Kansas and Oklahoma, how It's not just the fracking causing earthquakes, okay? It's the fracking in conjunction with all the wind farms there. Because they also do what's called thumping. I don't know if you ever heard that. Every so many turns it thumps. And it ionizes. They're pumping some of the same crap into the ground as coming out of the freaking planes in the sky. But other than that, sorry, it was kind of a longer video. But you know, a lot of this is important, and people just can't believe it. And I have mountains and mountains and mountains of information on weather modification that suggests they know exactly what they're doing. And when I was covering weather modification law, like one reason they don't want people knowing is because there's a lot of money. I always usually end with disaster capital or hashtag disaster capitalism, because there's a lot of money to be made. If you know what the weather is going to do, then it's like being psychic. You can bank off this. There's betting on the weather. What was it? The Chicago Mercantile weather betting and all that. If you're part of this and you know what's going on, then there's tons of money to be made. But other than that, we'll end on this visible feed of Hurricane Dorian. And if you're in Florida, stay safe, and we will check back in at a later date.